Tucker Carlson is out at Fox News the same day that Don Lemon is out at CNN. The former CIA head Mike Morell testifies that our current Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was behind the October 2020 letter signed by 51 intelligence officials lying that the Hunter Biden laptop was, quote, Russian disinformation. And Bed Bath & Beyond and David's Bridal go bankrupt in the same week. This is the noteworthy news that you need to know for Monday, April 24th, 2023. But first, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, and also follow me at Julie R. Hartman. This first news story, my gosh, we have not just one, but two mainstream media hosts on the outs this morning. First, the Fox News Corporation released a statement saying that Tucker Carlson would no longer be on their network. It reads, Fox News Media and Tucker Carlson have agreed to part ways. We thank him for his service to the network as a host and prior to that as a contributor. Mr. Carlson's last program was Friday, April 21st. Fox News Tonight will air live at 8 p.m. Eastern starting this evening as an interim show helmed by rotating Fox News personalities until a new host is named. That's sort of amazing that his last show already happened, and it appeared, according to a show on Friday, that he didn't seem to think that it was going to be his last show. So it really is stunning to think that he won't even have the opportunity to say goodbye. So this morning, that bombshell hit, and then just about 20 to 30 minutes later, another bombshell hit, this time pertaining to the CNN host, Don Lemon. He posted on his social media that he apparently was fired and did not know that his job was even in jeopardy. He wrote, I was informed this morning by my agent that I have been terminated by CNN. I am stunned. After 17 years at CNN, I would have thought that someone in management would have had the decency to tell me directly. At no time was I ever given any indication that I would not be able to continue to do the work that I have loved at the network. It is clear that there are some larger issues at play. With that said, I want to thank my colleagues and the many teams I have worked with for an incredible run. They are the most talented journalists in the business, and I wish them all of the best. We don't know, obviously, why these two individuals were fired, or in the case of Tucker Carlson, we don't even know if he was fired. Though it seems like with CNN's Don Lemon, he's gotten into some dust-ups recently. He infamously said that Nikki Haley was, quote, past her prime, and that caused him to get suspended for a few days and undergo some mandatory tolerance training. Also, he recently got into it just a few days ago on the air with Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a Republican presidential candidate, and gathered some heat for allegedly being rude to Mr. Ramaswamy. So it may appear that CNN was just done with Don Lemon's antics. The Fox News one is a bit more curious. Tucker Carlson was the #1 rated news on the network, on Fox News host, on the network on Fox News. And also he's one of the top rated hosts in the country. So for him to just be abruptly kicked out like that, well, it is a head scratcher. You can't help but wonder whether or not this may have been a condition of the recent settlement that Fox News had with Dominion Voting Systems. Just last week, they agreed to pay Dominion Voting Systems $787 million in order to avoid going to trial. Dominion Voting Systems sued the Fox News Corporation for $1.6 billion, claiming that its hosts knowingly espoused false claims about the Dominion voting system equipment in the aftermath of the 2020 election. They said that some of the Fox News hosts said that the Dominion voting systems paid government bribes and switched votes. And so they, meaning Fox News, settled this just hours after the start of a trial which would have brought Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, and even the 92-year-old founder of Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, to the witness stand. This also would have exposed text messages between the hosts allegedly talking about the Dominion voting system. So maybe this was a part of the terms of settlement. We don't know, but we are probably not going to be seeing the last of either of these mainstream media hosts, of course, on two very different sides of the aisle. But boy, what a morning. Now on to another bombshell story. Our current U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, has been exposed for allegedly being the individual who is behind that 51 intelligence official document, or that letter that was signed, again, by 51 intelligence officials, in which they lied that Hunter Biden's laptop, in that whole story that came out just weeks before the 2020 election, was, quote, Russian disinformation. Mike Morell, who's the former head of the CIA, he was head of it for various times between 2010 and 2013 under the Obama administration, he testified recently before the House Judiciary Committee. And he said that he received a phone call from Anthony Blinken, again, now our Secretary of State. Back then, he was a senior Biden presidential campaign official. Mr. Morell apparently received a phone call from Mr. Blinken, who asked him to help discredit the story of Hunter Biden's laptop. That story broke. It was released by the New York Post on Twitter on actually my birthday in 2020, October 14th, 2020. And then just 3 days later, on October 17th, was allegedly when Mr. Blinken made this call to Mr. Morell. Now, Mr. Morell said that the call was, quote, couched as simply gathering Morell's reaction to the New York Post story. Yet what it actually did was, quote, set in motion the events that led to the issuance of the public statement. That statement, as I indicated, was signed by 51 former intelligence officials, and it said that the Hunter Biden laptop story had, quote, all of the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. And so that letter was actually publicized. It was published in Politico. The title of that story was Hunter Biden's Story is Russian Disinfo, Dozens of Former Officials Say. And actually, at the last presidential debate, our now president, Joe Biden, used this letter as a way to discredit President Trump's charges of the Hunter Biden laptop story. Let's listen to our current president talk about that letter.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan.
Now, Douglas Wise is a former Defense Intelligence Agency deputy director. He was one of the 51 intelligence officials who signed this letter in 2020. He admitted recently to the Australian newspaper that, quote, all of us figured that a significant portion of that content had to be real. Wow. He's basically admitting to lying. He's saying that he and the other signees knew that this was phony. He sort of backtracked in that interview by saying that part of Russian disinformation is that they mix truth with non-truth. But nevertheless, he said that he did not regret signing the letter because, quote, Russians or even ill-intended conservative elements could have planted stuff in there. Very interesting. He uses the word could. But just because the possibility exists doesn't mean that you should sign a letter affirmatively saying that you believe this to be Russian disinformation. But it appears that Mr. Wise and others were willing to lie because they thought this would be, quote unquote, a noble lie in order to get President Biden elected. But really only in very few instances are there, quote, noble lies. If a murderer comes to your house looking to murder your sister and your sister's in the house and the murderer asks you if your sister's there, yes, of course it would be a noble lie to say no. But is this really a noble lie? To say that one of our foreign adversaries is intervening here in this election, I mean, we already have enough problems with our foreign adversaries. We don't need people here in the United States actively trying to give them a hand and disrupt our norms. It's also just amazing, if you look at the past few months, indeed the past few years, the amount of lies that have been exposed is just stunning. And we sort of treat them like, oh yeah, well, that's just another one. Think about it. Think about the origins of COVID-19. We were told for so long that it originated in a wet market, that it came from a bat. That turned out to be a lie. Conservatives who said that it probably leaked from a lab were censored and ridiculed. Okay, then it comes out that it actually did leak from a lab and we just sort of brush it off. Oh, well, the media lied to us. Who cares? I mean, even if you look at the vaccines, you're told that the vaccines were totally safe. If you ever questioned the vaccines, then you were a horrible bigot. Then one of the chief executives of Pfizer testifies before the European Parliament and says that at the time of the rollout of the Pfizer vaccine, they had no evidence that it prevented transmissibility. Oh well, just another lie we were fed. Nothing to see there. I mean, you could go on and on. We have been told that the FBI was a fair institution. We found out that they were colluding with Twitter in order to suppress conservative content. We find out that there's an internal memo that was being circulated in the FBI that called Catholic Americans violent extremists. We were told that Twitter and other social media companies were impartial and were proponents of free speech. That turned out not to be true. We were lied that Donald Trump colluded with the Russians back in 2016. We were told that the Steele dossier was totally legitimate. That turned out to be a lie. We were told, speaking of what I was saying earlier about COVID, we were told that we did not fund the Wuhan virology lab, but it turns out that we actually did. The National Institute of Health, in part, funded the Wuhan virology lab where COVID leaked. Our taxpayer money went to that virology lab. And of course, this is just another example. We were told that the laptop was Russian disinformation, and it turned out that, of course, it wasn't. So my question for you is, when are we going to wake up and realize that every single day we are bombarded with an avalanche of lies? And crucially, when are we going to hold our leaders, in this case President Biden, accountable for such harmful lies? It appears to me that there's a very good case for not only Secretary of State Blinken to resign, but for President Biden to resign too. Now on to the final news story of the day, this one pertaining to the economy. Bed Bath & Beyond and David's Bridal, two of the biggest companies here in the United States, have filed for bankruptcy in the same week. First, let's start with Bed Bath & Beyond. Really, what happened with Bed Bath & Beyond, they started going downhill starting in the beginning of 2021 when they announced shortly after the January 6th attack on the Capitol that they would be dropping MyPillow products from their stores. This is, of course, because the founder and CEO of MyPillow is Mike Lindell, and Mike Lindell made some comments about January 6th, which Bed Bath & Beyond said they alleged that Mike Lindell was supporting an insurrection against the government and decided to drop his products from their stores. This led to a big loss in revenue for them, and a couple of months later, Bed Bath & Beyond announced that they were also going to drop air conditioning from their stores in order to offset that drop in sales. And then in September of 2022, at the end of last year, Bed Bath & Beyond announced that they were closing hundreds of stores across the country, and they were laying off 20% of their workforce. This very tragically led to the CFO jumping to his death just a few weeks after that announcement. And so last week, Bed Bath & Beyond announced that they were filing for bankruptcy, and they cited, quote, grappling with low inventory levels, lagging sales, and a rapidly dwindling cash pile. Look, some people are arguing that this is an example of go woke, go broke, and that is certainly true, but also in addition to the quote-unquote woke policies, if you will, Bed Bath & Beyond, that is getting rid of MyPillow, it's also a very difficult time to run a company right now. Inflation is at a high. It was down from the 8% all-time high in the past, I should say, 2 decades. Now it's at about 6%, but still that is very high. Interest rates are extremely high, and it's really difficult to run a company right now in this inflationary environment, thanks, or not so thanks, to the irresponsible monetary policy pursued by the Biden administration. David's Bridal, as I said, also announced bankruptcy. They are the largest wedding gown retailer in North America. This is a stunning fact. Apparently, 25% of brides in the United States wear David's Bridal dresses to their wedding. Well, not anymore. According to an announcement, they say the company, which previously went bankrupt in 2018, said its business has suffered in recent years due to the COVID-19 pandemic, decreased demand for wedding dresses, and high inflation. Look at those 3 things that were cited there. COVID-19 pandemic, decreased demand for wedding dresses, and high inflation. Numbers 1 and 3 are direct results of the irresponsible monetary and otherwise policy pursued by the Biden administration. They shouldn't say COVID-19 pandemic because it was really the lockdowns that contributed to the economic and financial volatility. High inflation is certainly because of President Biden and his irresponsible policies. But what especially fascinates me is reason number 2, decreased demand for wedding dresses. Of course, some could argue that that is because of the pandemic. During 2020, when the country locked down, obviously venues shut their doors to people. People had to either delay their weddings or find alternative ways of getting married, maybe getting married in their backyard instead of at a big venue. But it appears that this is a bigger trend in American society writ large, that there are fewer weddings. This is according to David's Bridal. There were about 1.7 million marriages in the United States in 2020, the lowest level in 121 years. And this, they said, after several years of more than 2 million marriages annually. Now, this sort of rebounded last year in 2022. There were 1.9 million marriages in 2022, but that's compared to a 2.2 million average marriage rate for the 3 years before the pandemic. So it just shows you sort of the extent of this go woke, go broke mentality. Go woke, go broke, certainly with regard to monetary policy, but also our culture has an enormous impact here. Modern day feminism used to be a great thing, certainly 100 years ago when women were fighting for the right to vote and gender parity with males, it was a force for good. But now that we've really achieved this equality, feminism has moved into the realm of telling women that they don't need a man, in order to be happy in life, that marriage is an old relic of the past, a patriarchal institution. And so no wonder we're seeing an all-time low of marriages. And it's just fascinating to see that this cultural trend is sort of in part perhaps contributing to a company like David's Bridal going bankrupt. Please stay tuned to this show for more news. This is Julie Noted. Also, be sure to check out my show, Timeless, where I talk about timeless, eternal, non-political subjects. And take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.